Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
And welcome back. Yes, it's another edition of Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, and today we're talking about a mystery and other stuff with John MacLachlan Gray. Now, his latest work is right in front of me. It's Mr. Good Evening, a mystery story set in Vancouver, BC, in and around the year 1929. So, Mr. Gray, thanks for being with us today, taking time away from your, I'm sure, busy schedule to be with us here.
Oh, my busy schedule, Dennis. My busy... Gosh, the garden is calling me.
And mine is calling me and saying, stay away, you wrecked us last year, so don't come here again.
I know, the black thumb syndrome,
So, it's John MacLachlan Gray, and actually we're recording this, I don't usually like to mention dates, but we're near the end of May, and on June 2nd, 1917, something special happened. What can you tell us about that? I'm sure you know all about it.
No, I don't.
June 2nd, 1917, Billy Bishop.
1917? Well, I know that was...
Billy Bishop.
You're talking the First World War. I've left that far behind me, Dennis.
Yeah.
Gosh, tell me. No, and I'm never good at dates. What happened June 17th?
June 2nd, 1917, Billy Bishop, air ace, Canadian-born air ace, shot down a number of other guys, poor blighters in the other uniform, was awarded the Victoria Cross. So,
that was the date. Was that the date?
That was the date, yep.
Oh gosh, yes. Yep. I'm ambivalent about your races and scores and medals for how many guys you killed. You know, if you look for on the war on the ground and you see where guys got the Victoria Cross, usually it's because they saved a bunch of guys' lives. You know.
Yeah.
It's not because they killed a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And it's kind of gruesome, the sort of the scores, marking scores.
Yeah, and being a World War I ace. And second only to the Red Baron. And
well, the Red, but the thing is that Ajasta, which was the flight of a flight of three or more planes, the leader of the Jasta was awarded a doubtful kill. Okay, so we don't know really because they had a different system of counting. The Baron had more time at it. He survived a long time.
Right, and that, of course, led... Well, the reason I bring this up is because one of your great earlier successes was Billy Bishop Goes to War, which implies you were a musician and a singer, and now we're talking to you about a novel, one of many you've done. So were you a writer first, or a musician first, or both?
Well, I started out playing with the Lincolns, which was a soul music band, Sam and Dave and Wilson Pickett type thing. And then I got into the theater, and I was directing in theater, and I was doing the theater, and I found that I could get more work writing music for theater than I could get directing plays, actually. And so I was writing musicals and music for theater, and I was watching how plays were put together. So then I decided, well, why can't I write a musical? So I wrote a musical, and it got on. And so I wrote another one, and on it went until people didn't really want to see put them on anymore. The whole taste changed in the 90s, and so I was really badly out of fashion, and so I decided, well, I'll just write letters to the editor, and that ended up a job writing a column for the Vancouver Sun, and then the column for the Globe and Mail. So now I'm a writer.
Yay.
Okay? Are you following me here?
Yep.
I'm also John MacLachlan Gray because there was already a John Gray with the Globe and Mail, and because there was a John Gray who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and you don't know what it feels like to go out and do a reading and have a number of females, I say this is females, in full makeup, kind of thing. Not the kind of audience that I expect at readings of my stuff. Because they thought I was the John Gray PhD who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Oh, boy.
So, you can only take a certain amount of humiliation. And then my mother died. And it was a Spanish tradition to... Dad named me after a fighter pilot, and then he gave me his name next to it for obvious reasons. So I changed that. I went the Spanish route and put my mother into the middle. So that's the whole story. And I was a writer. And then I wrote some nonfiction. I wrote a book about tattoos. I wrote a survey of Canadian sort of culture, so called Lost in North America. And then I said, well, why don't I try making things up? And so I did the same stuff I would do before, which is the research stuff and everything, because I could do that. And I started writing novels. You see, everything kind of makes a weird kind of sense.
Yeah.
Except that, in Canada, in the United States, if you want to be successful in the United States, you specialize. If you want to write, what are you writing for? Are you writing for television? Writing for film? Is it long form? Is it short form? Is it for series? Is it right? And
Correct.
People specialize in those things. In Canada, you can't specialize. People just get tired of you.
Well, well, okay. You get tired of you. Yep. I can see that, but I think that's changing because, like, I'm reading your latest here. We're with John MacLachlan Gray, and the book is Mr. Good Evening, murder mystery set in the late 1920s in good old Vancouver, BC. And as I delivered the Vancouver Sun for many a year out there in Crescent Beach.
Did?
Oh, sure. And went to White Rock Junior High and Crescent Park Elementary and all that kind of stuff. And so it's great because 40 years ago you couldn't read a book, a mystery set in Canada, and then slowly, gradually things have changed. And now you can open up a book and read about Toronto, Vancouver, Saskatoon, anywhere.
You can actually read a book and recognize a place you've been.
Exactly.
I remember the first time I heard a Canadian accent on stage, and I remember because I was 34. When I first heard, when I went to theater school, the first thing you learned were to do your British accents and your American accents.
Yep.
It's all the process of decolonization that's happened kind of on its own, because I thought we were done for when the free trade deal went, that America would just swallow it. And that hadn't happened. I was wrong. Yeah.
Wow, you were wrong. Well, I was living in the States at the time, and I remember Ross Perot was saying, that big sound you hear is all the jobs being sucked to Mexico. Well, maybe they were, I guess, but we're still around, although you can't...
I know. Yeah. And it's just, and the culturally honed. You can remember when Canadian songs, the Canadian content regulations first came out, right?
Yep.
And people said, well, there will be nothing but Gordon Lightfoot and Anne Murray on the radio, right? And and the guys would with DJs, because they would kind of with this snide voice go, well, let's reach into the beaver barrel, and would put on a Canadian song. And with that, Pierre Janot did this, and everyone hates government sticking things down our throats, but suddenly studios started cropping up.
Yes.
People,
Yes.
I mean, it was...
Yes.
It's been a remarkable thing, yeah.
I was one of the few at that time. I wasn't on the air at the time. I was writing commercials, but still, I said to myself, no, there's no reason why you have to play a song that's number 96 on the Billboard Top 100 over a song by a group from Vancouver around the corner. Let them get their exposure as opposed to the diddly wops from Detroit, who no one ever heard of, and all the guys.
Yeah.
They're still arguing.
And then you started getting and then you started getting crossover. And so Canadians started getting affirmation from the States, which we all know we need.
Yeah.
I mean, Billy Bishop was big in Canada, largely because it went to Broadway, and got good reviews in the States and stuff. I mean, it's just, but that's the sort of colony in our mind, and we want the approval of the father country or something like that. But the fact is, but the fact is, there were bands then started cropping up that, like the Tragically Hip, they were never popular in the States, but they were huge in Canada.
Yeah.
Remember the Crash Test Dummies?
Oh yeah.
There's generations of them now.
Exactly. Well, it wouldn't have happened. The snowball has to start somewhere. A small one rolling down a hill, it gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have had like Bryan Adams or somebody if there wasn't a recording studio in Vancouver that was big enough and good enough, and then we wouldn't have had and managers like Bruce Allen to get these guys going, and Loverboy, and the list goes on and on.
Exactly.
Yeah, so,
Sam Feldman and the bunch.
Yeah. So it's I agree. I never thought anything wrong with the CanCon rules, except everyone I worked with did. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And they still do. They still talk about, it's stupid, blah, blah, blah. I'm going, can't argue with these guys. Can't argue with stupidity. So.
I know. But, you can't, people who are kind of colonialized in their own minds, sort of,
So this brings us back to Mr. Good Evening.
Oh, Mr. Good Evening.
I love it.
Well, this is sort of interesting because Mr. Good Evening is really, because Vancouver was the edge of the earth at the time, right? Yeah. I mean, you couldn't get further away, really, than Australia, Tasmania, or some damn thing, But the edge of the earth, and world events are suddenly in concentrated form, kind of plopped down here in Vancouver. And if you go decade by decade, you can see the whole thing's reflected. Whether whether it's the Ku Klux Klan, I was into the Ku Klux Klan for a while, or American Prohibition in the second novel, and here it's the organized crime, 1930s.
Yeah. So
before the crash.
Now, was there Ogden cigarettes at that time?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I don't make stuff up.
I know, but I just can't remember seeing Ogden cigarettes.
Oh yeah, Ogden's a very popular brand.
Oh, good.
Very popular. But I don't make up facts. I don't make up people if I have to. I kind of embroider them, Rich. I kind of like I cast real people in a role, and then they start working as an actor, and they sort of do things that probably those people wouldn't do. Understand what I mean?
Yep.
So I put these people in those situations, but I don't make up much at all. I draw lines between them, but the facts themselves are astounding as they are. They're what I call holy shit facts. They're facts that make you go holy shit.
Yep.
Like that. For example, Canuck House, which is for kids with cancer, in the center of Shaughnessy, the richest area in Vancouver, that was the headquarters for the Ku Klux Klan. And you go, holy shit!
Holy shit!
Right, and then you kind of make a little connection. You start to make a collection of these facts. And then they kind of join together, like those dots you used to do when you were a kid, to make a man when they had numbers on them, and you joined the dots, right? Except there are no numbers. Yeah.
No. So when you're doing Mr. Good Evening, do you write on a typewriter or a computer or by freehand?
Oh, I write on a computer, and enthusiastically, because if I don't have to go down to the library every second day with a list, crawling around the stacks looking for stuff, or into the. Okay, so I can go, and like something like Ogden's or like the Ogden's tobacco. And I think, okay, he's going to smoke. What's he going to smoke? What did they smoke? What did what you smoke meant? Where's the da di da di da? And so you're suddenly reading all about cigarette smoking for the next probably the day.
Yes, that's what happened.
That's kind of how it works.
Well, that history thing I sent you with the Billy Bishop thing on it. See, I have a subscription to newspapers.com.
Sure.
Yeah, and so I get all sorts of weird, strange Canadian stories out of that, and I do this twice a week on an internet radio station. So it's great. So you can see ads for beers that don't exist anymore.
Sure.
All sorts of neat stuff.
Well, I can research all that stuff pretty good. I did the Victorian England. I did 1860s London for a while. So doing Vancouver, I'm here, and I could actually drive down and go down to where certain things happened, and kind of walk around and see how far would it be to walk down there, and what would you pass, so you don't have to make shit up,
And you have Kiefer Street in there?
Sure.
Yeah,
sure I do.
My dad grew up on Kiefer Street.
Oh, yeah, that was a good neighborhood.
Back then, yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I got maps of the city and the years and the hotels, the number of hotels that were in the city, because it had such a transient population that there were far more hotels than there are now, and they covered a lot of ground. And the Vancouver, the second Vancouver hotel, which is the one that this one replaced, it was all the way from Georgia to Robson. It was absolutely huge. It was one of the biggest, most luxurious hotels in the empire.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
amazing.
Was it a CP hotel or a CN hotel at the time?
It went CN and then CP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was. But yeah. And this is, most mysteries are like single plots. The sleuth goes in. There are a bunch of suspects, and the murder is such about 6. He goes to the suspects, and then solves the murder. I don't do that quite. In fact, I'm not even sure that the murder has been solved by the end of it. Well, it sort of has, but it's not who done it so much as how did it happen and why done it.
Why did it happen, right?
And isn't it weird that it was done? And so, you take something like Brother 12, the cult leader, up into Corsi Avenue. So you don't want to make stuff up because it wrecks the stuff that you don't make up. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right? If I make stuff up, why you won't get the holy shit fact. They got to trust that you're telling them these are facts. That he did have a Madam had basically a dominatrix as an assistant, and who carried a whip, and all these wealthy people with lawyers and publishers and this all fell for this cult, in this day and age, when we think it's weird now, it's always been weird.
It's always been. Well, when I was a kid, we'd go from Crescent Beach, my brother and I, and stay with my aunt who lived on East Georgia Street, and she was a weirdo. Like, she had subscriptions to Fate magazine and all that kind of stuff, and so I'd read these things, and I thought she was pretty wacko. Very nice lady, but wacko as the day is long. And she took us to a service from this guy named Brother John. And
okay.
It would be just like this Brother Osiris or the brother. It was just totally. My brother and I still talk about it, about how insane that was. So.
Yeah. It's well, it can get pretty dotty. It really can. And the trial, at the trial, his trial for fraud. When suddenly the judge started barking like a dog. Okay, now I didn't make that up. I mean, I'm not a surrealist, but this was in the course of the trial. I have a trial in the first book of White Angel too, and I had to edit the trial, but I didn't have to make anything up. It was just jaw-dropping, a person is found with a bullet in the center of their forehead, and the cop decides that it was an accidental death.
Yeah.
And they said, well, how you're saying that it's an accident, that the bullet ricocheted all across the room and then went into the person's forehead, to which, and this is the evidence or the testimony, well, it had to go somewhere.
That's wacko. That's whack, as the kids. You can't make up this stuff.
No, you can't. You really can't. And also the headiness of the months before the crash. And the reader knows the crash is coming, so it's highly ironic some of the things people are trying to do. And the real estate boom was amazing then. There was a picture of a real estate thing that went down a lineup to buy real estate that went from on Hastings Street from about Richards down to Maine.
And there was a real estate boom in Vancouver at that time, obviously.
Totally. Vancouver's a series of real estate booms. Vancouver was never settled. It was gridded out by the CPR way before the first settler ever arrived. It was gridded into lots and streets and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, it's always been real estate driven, and with all the what we love about the real estate booms in Vancouver, booms and busts.
Yeah. We're talking to John MacLachlan Gray. The book in front of me is Mr. Good Evening. It's a mystery. It involves the fatal flapper, a person who's killed with a high-heeled shoe, and there's a detective, there's a newspaper guy. Now, the interesting thing about the newspaper guy, to me, being an old radio guy, is that he kind of transformed into one of the early radio personalities. And you talked,
Earl Kelly.
Yeah, you talked about the CPR, seeing one of the two who had the radio across the country on their trains, and that kind of sort of set the fuse for radio.
It relayed through the Hotel Vancouver, which was CN at the time. Yeah. It relayed to the railways. It was CP. Always CP Rail. Or was it? Oh no, God, please, John, don't get that old. But it relayed, and so then it relayed from the train stations out to farms and stuff like that. And the first coast-to-coast personality was a guy who was actually an Australian, whose name was Earl Kelly. And I've never met anyone with the CBC who had ever heard of Earl Kelly, and he was the first national broadcaster in CBC history. Right up until 1950, 52. And he would get the news 6 nights a week. Six nights a week.
Yep.
No, not Sunday.
Yep.
6 nights a week.
Yep.
And he did it in 15 minutes, and he covered up to 90 items. Straight off the wire.
Straight off.
Straight off.
I love it.
Straight off. And the thing about radio at the time, I mean, people were all mystical about it, because that the first radio signals, when it was discovered, they started learning about it. People actually believed you could communicate with the dead with it, right?
I didn't know that, but makes sense to me.
You could communicate with the dead, And for somebody, it was an almost mystical medium. You're out there, and okay, let's say you're in Radisson, Saskatchewan, okay?
Yeah.
And you're picking up a voice on the radio, all right?
Yeah.
And out of the sky, it's a rich male voice, and it's coming from the air.
Yes.
Okay?
Right.
Okay? You're not seeing in your mind. You're not seeing a guy sitting in the studio talking to a mic. This is the voice of God.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was, the amazing thing is that they actually named this guy, the country did, because for some reason he never identified himself. I think he was told not to, probably by the paper, because they wanted the province to get the credit for doing it. And the country named him Mr. Good Evening. Because he would his sign-off was always, and now for you in the cities and the lighthouses and the farmers and the stuff, we wish you a restful good evening.
I love it.
You can't resist this stuff.
I kind of wish I had been around in those days.
Oh gosh, there are a few years that I would really like to be around. Well, you'd have to have money.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, John MacLachlan Gray, if you were living in the 1920s, what would you be doing?
Oh, I'd be writing for sure. I mean, I'd probably be doing what I'm doing now. I would probably be writing sort of crime novels. Because salacious crime novels. That's where the money was.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and theater was. I would be also do. I do theater. I would never. But I probably split my time between the two because there was so much going on at the time. Because TV just sucked up so much entertainment energy. It was like a black hole for radio. It was great for theater and for the arts because they had to do stuff live.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it would be okay. But I wouldn't have a job.
No.
Any
a
more
job.
than I would now. The jobs are even worse than they are now.
The only one I would ever like would be working for a newspaper. So.
Oh, I think that would be good.
Yeah.
I think that would be really good.
Because it was like when that was really still up until the 90s, basically, that was still the main source of stuff you could get in your hands and look at it, and somebody had folded it and delivered it to you. You didn't have to search through 17 different websites to find one story. So.
Exactly, and you could, and the person had it was in black and white. It hadn't disappeared into the ether.
Right.
People couldn't deny they said something in the newspaper quite as easily as they can now, or and people can't misinform as easily in the newspaper, because the newspaper loses all its value if it misinforms people.
Yeah.
In a democracy, at least.
Well,
let's not talk about an autocracy. It has value in a different way. Let's say it's propaganda, but the newspapers were kind of reliable things, relatively speaking.
Well, I remember, newspapers still had a sort of a gravitas, because I remember even in the 60s, my uncle, because I lived with my aunt and uncle when I was going to BCIT, they wouldn't put it in the newspaper if it wasn't true. So people believed it.
I read it in the paper.
Yeah, it got to be true. So, so you've got the Mr. Good Evening now. Is that the third part of your Rain Coast Noir trilogy?
That's the trilogy. That's the three of them. 1924, 1925, and 29.
Okay.
And they're it's nice, a little package, there, little. I feel really good about it, actually.
And
frankly.
yeah, and somebody described them as a dreadfully funny novel. So is that kind of...
Well, I do have a dark sense of humor.
Yes.
Okay, I'm from the Maritimes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have a maritime sense of humor and a maritime sense of irony. So I take delight in things that sometimes other people, like the activities of a coroner, for example. I take a kind of fiendish delight in that sort of thing.
Well, dear listener, if you're ever looking for a great 3 set of books, get The White Angel, Vile Spirits, Mr. Good Evening, all by John MacLachlan Gray, who has been with us here. And do you ever plan to retire, sir?
No, I'll die in harness. My brain will shut down. But I can't. You can't retire your brain. You know. It's just you can't do it. I don't. It would be easier to retire if there's someplace I went to work. But where you go to work is inside your skull. It's a whole lot different. It's a whole lot harder to resign.
We're in the spring of 2024 right now. What are you working on now?
Oh, I'm very interested in the Bordeaux expedition, which was a French fascist who tried to get from Fort St. John to Telegraph Creek with his, it was called the Champagne Safari, he had his wine cellar with him and his mistress and his wife, 160 cowboys, and it was all suspiciously wrapped up with Himmler and Vancouver, meanwhile, there was a large fascist contingent in Vancouver. Not anti-Semitic, nobody. Anti-Semitism never hit in Vancouver because really of Oppenheimer was who created Stanley Park. He was the most successful mayor Vancouver ever had to this day, and he just ran until he got tired of it. There were fascist organizations and fascist newsletters and all kinds of fascist activities that actually came to a head in something called the Battle of Ballantine Pier, which was a kind of an anti-communist sort of riot on the part of the police and goons and railway goons and
right down there on the waterfront.
Yeah. So it's kind of I got these two fascist things up north. I got fascists down south, and I don't exactly know where this is going to go, but we'll see.
We'll see. We'll look forward to that. I have to get back now to finish Mr. Good Evening because it's wrapped me in its tentacles, and that would be great. So thank you very much for your time today, sir.
Dennis, thank you.
Maybe we'll
look forward. That was a lovely chat.
Thanks. Maybe we'll do another one someday.
Oh, good. Maybe I'll write another one, God, and we'll be alive and kicking. Wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.